Montana Territory, 1885. A stagecoach rattles through the windswept prairie, carrying Evelyn Harper and her dreams of a new life. In her trunk lies a pristine wedding dress and a letter promising marriage to a man she's never met. But fate has other plans. Instead of wedding bells, she finds ashes, her intended's homestead burned to the ground, his body among the ruins. Stranded in a harsh land where survival demands more than hope, she catches the attention of Lucas Grady, a solitary French hand who's known more horses than people. When he offers her his name in marriage, a shield of protection in a dangerous territory, neither expects the quiet bloom of something deeper. Could a marriage born of necessity become one of love, or will the shadows of the past consume their fragile chance at happiness? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The stagecoach's wheels ground to a halt in the russet Montana dust, and Evelyn Harper's gloved hands tightened around her reticule. Through the window, Millbrook seemed little more than a collection of weather-beaten buildings huddled against the vast prairie sky. Not the prosperous town Richard had described in his letters. The driver helped her down, her boots touching Montana soil for the first time. The trunk that held her wedding dress, ordered specially from a shop in Boston, thudded beside her. Around her neck, Richard's letter crinkled in its envelope, his promises of a fine house and fertile farmland growing heavier with each step. "Richard Blackwood's place?" she asked the station master, who paused in his loading of mail sacks. His weathered face darkened and something in Evelyn's chest tightened. "Miss, you'd best speak with Sheriff Mills." He gestured toward a building with peeling paint. "He's the one who found—" He stopped, mouth working silently. The sheriff's office smelled of tobacco and old coffee. The man himself stood when she entered, removing his hat. His eyes held the same shadow as the station master's. "Miss Harper?" His voice was gentle. "We've been expecting you, though we hoped our telegram would reach you in time." "Telegram?" The word came out faint. He pulled out a chair. "Please, sit." She remained standing. "Where is Richard?" The silence stretched like a thread about to snap. Finally, the sheriff spoke. "3 nights ago, some men rode out to the Blackwood homestead. Range wars have been brewing, disputes over water rights and grazing land. Richard had made enemies among the cattle barons." He paused. "They burned everything. By the time we saw the flames, the room tilted." Evelyn gripped the back of the chair, her legs threatening to buckle. "His body." The words scraped her throat. "Found. In the ruins. I'm sorry, Miss Harper." She didn't remember leaving the sheriff's office. Somehow she found herself at the burned homestead, the acrid smell of ash still hanging in the air. The house was nothing but blackened timbers and collapsed walls. Her trunk lay open beside her, the white wedding dress spread across the scorched earth like fallen snow. A horse's hooves crunched on the char-strewn ground. She didn't turn. "Miss?" A man's voice, low and rough-edged. "You shouldn't be out here. Alone. This was to be my home." She touched the dress's delicate lace, now smudged with ash. "All my hopes, wrapped up in white silk and promises." Footsteps approached, careful. "Lucas Grady, ma'am. I work the Peterson Ranch next valley over. Sheriff asked me to check the property, make sure the raiders didn't come back." She finally looked up. He was tall, lean as a fence post, with eyes, the color of prairie grass in autumn. A long scar traced his jaw, disappearing into his collar. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, his manner reserved but not unkind. "Did you know him, Richard?" Lucas shifted. "Some. Kept to himself mostly. Came to town for supplies, church on Sundays." He studied the ruins. "Didn't deserve this, though. No one does." Evelyn gathered the dress, noting how the ash had worked, its way into the fabric, like tiny gray tears. "I don't even know where to go. My family's all back east, and I spent everything I had to come here." "Town's got a boarding house," Lucas offered. "Run by Widow Chen. Decent place, fair rates. I have no money for rates, fair or otherwise." The admission burned like the ashes at her feet. "I was supposed to be a bride, not a burden." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, watching the prairie wind stir the char. "Sun's getting low," he finally said. "Let me at least drive you back to town? Not safe out here, especially now." She nodded, too empty to argue. As they loaded her trunk into his wagon, a glint caught her eye. She knelt, brushing aside debris, and found a small metal box, its contents mostly protected from the flames. Inside lay land deeds, letters, and a journal, Richard's life reduced to paper and ink. Lucas helped her into the wagon's seat, his hands careful and impersonal. As they drove away, Evelyn clutched the box in her lap, the ruined wedding dress, folded beside her. Behind them, the skeleton of her almost home stood stark against the dying light, while ahead the unknown stretched wide as the Montana sky. Widow Chen's boarding house turned out to be full, or so she claimed, her dark eyes flickering between Evelyn and Lucas with careful assessment. The other establishments in town offered similar excuses, their reluctance hanging thick as the evening fog rolling in from the mountains. "A single woman, arriving for a wedding that won't happen," Lucas muttered as they left the third boarding house. "They're afraid of scandal or trouble following you." Evelyn's shoulders stiffened. "I'm not asking for charity." "No." His voice softened slightly. "You're asking for basic decency, which seems in short supply tonight." He checked the darkening sky. "I've got a cabin. It's small, but there's a lean-to where I sleep when tracking strays. You can take the main room, just until you sort things out." She almost refused, but the wind was picking up, carrying the first bite of autumn chill, and her options had dwindled to none. The cabin hunched low against the prairie wind, weathered logs silvered by sun and time. Inside, everything spoke of solitude. One chair at the table, one cup by the wash-basin, one blanket on the narrow bed. But it was clean, the hearth swept and ready for fire. "It's not much," Lucas said, lighting the lamp. Shadows retreated too. The corners, revealing walls lined with rough shelves. Books filled them, dozens of them, their spines cracked and well-worn. "You read?" The surprise slipped out before she could catch it. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Long winters out here. Words keep better company than wolves." He built up the fire while she stood awkward in the center of his space, still clutching Richard's metal box. When the flames caught, Lucas disappeared outside, returning with her trunk and an armload of firewood. "I'll see to my horse, then bed down in the lean-to." He paused at the door. "Bolt solid if you're worried." "I'm not afraid of you, Mr. Grady." "Lucas," he corrected quietly. "And maybe you should be. Town's not wrong about reputations." But he left the door unlatched, a gesture of trust that touched. More than words could have. Alone, Evelyn explored the cabin's confines. The books surprised her. Poetry, philosophy, history, a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets, Thoreau's Walden, not the library of a simple ranch hand. A Bible lay on the bedside table, its leather cover soft with age. When she opened it, an inscription caught her eye. "To my beloved son Lucas, may you find your way back to grace with eternal love, Mother." The date was 15 years past. Below it, in a different hand, "Remember Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." The pages were marked with pressed flowers, careful notes in margins. A woman's thoughtful devotion, preserved in paper and ink. Something about it made Evelyn's throat tight, this evidence of love, carefully tended but left behind. She was still holding the Bible when Lucas returned with a cup of coffee and some bread. He stilled when he saw what was in her hands. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have pried." "No matter," but his voice was rough. "She died that year. Consumption. Father couldn't bear the ranch afterward, sold everything. I've been working other men's land since. The flowers, she pressed them every spring, said as long as we could find beauty in small things, Grace wasn't far behind." He set the coffee down. "You should eat something." "Thank you." She meant for more than the food. "I know this isn't proper." Proper died with Richard Blackwood. Lucas moved to the door. Sometimes survival matters more than reputation. In the lean-to, she could hear him settling for the night, the quiet sounds of another human presence, oddly comforting after the day's chaos. She opened Richard's box, spreading the contents on the table. Land deeds, letters, surveyor's maps, pieces of a puzzle she was too tired to solve tonight. The coffee was strong, the bread fresh. Outside, an owl called, answered by the distant howl of a wolf. Evelyn wrapped herself in the blanket that smelled of cedar and saddle leather and tried not to think about how quickly life could burn away, leaving only ashes and strangers' kindness in its wake. In the morning, she told herself she would find a way forward, but for now she let the fire's warmth and the sheltering walls of Lucas Grady's solitary cabin hold back the night. Morning arrived with frost on the window panes and rumors in town. Evelyn heard them whispered behind hands as she tried to inquire about work at the general store, about the fancy Eastern lady living in sin with the Grady hand, about how some women would do anything for a roof over their heads. "We don't hire your kind," the storekeeper's wife said firmly, though they'd posted a help wanted sign just yesterday. The schoolhouse door closed in her face before she could even state her qualifications. The dressmaker wouldn't meet her eyes. By noon, Evelyn's dignity was as worn as her boot heels on the hard-packed street. She found Lucas at the livery stable, watching him gentle, a nervous colt with quiet words and steadier hands. He looked up as she approached, reading something in her expression that made his jaw tighten. "Town's made up its mind about me," she said, voice carefully level. "Town's got nothing better to do." He ran a hand down the colt's neck. "Found any work?" Apparently my references from Boston's finest finishing school count for nothing against scandal. The bitterness slipped out despite her effort. "I don't suppose you need a ranch hand who's never roped a steer." "No." Lucas turned to face her fully. "But I might need a wife." The word hung in the autumn air between them. Evelyn's heart stuttered. "Mr. Grady, hear me out." He gestured to a hay bale, and she sat, skirts rustling against the sweet-smelling stalks. "Peterson's offering me his old foreman's place. 40 acres, water rights, and a decent house. Been saving to buy it these past 5 years, but a single. Man with no family, no roots." He shook his head. "Bank won't look twice at my loan application." Understanding dawned. "But a married man shows stability, investment in the community." His eyes met hers, direct and honest. "I'm not offering romance, Miss Harper, just a practical solution. You need shelter and protection. I need a wife on paper to secure the land. We'd live as partners, nothing more." Evelyn studied her gloved hands, mind whirling. "The town would still talk. They'll talk less about a widow remarrying than—" He left the alternative unspoken. "Widow." Her voice caught. Lucas's face softened slightly. "Sheriff's willing to backdate the marriage certificate. Say you and Richard wed the day before the fire. Makes things simpler, cleaner. Gives you his name and property rights. What's left of them." She thought of Richard's metal box, still unopened since that first night. Of the endless days stretching ahead with no prospects, no protection. Of the way Lucas had left his cabin door unlatched, trusting her with his private space and his mother's Bible. "You're a good man, Mr. Grady." "Lucas," he corrected again. "And you don't know that, don't know me at all." "I know enough." She squared her shoulders. "When would this arrangement need to be formalized?" "Reverend Morris would do it today. He's discretion bought and paid for, sees enough of life's hard corners to understand necessity." Lucas stood, offering his hand. "Your choice, Miss Harper. No shame in saying no." She looked at his calloused palm, remembering her other dreams. Of marriage, white lace, orange blossoms, love's sweet promises. But those belonged to a different woman, one who hadn't watched hope burn to ash in the Montana wind. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "I accept your proposition, Mr. Grady." "Lucas," he said one final time, helping her up. His grip was warm, steady. "If we're to be married, best get used to it." The marriage certificate, when Reverend Morris drafted it, was stark in its simplicity. No flowers, no witnesses beyond the sheriff and his deputy, just names and dates, carefully altered, to protect what little reputation she had left. Evelyn Margaret Harper, widow of Richard James Blackwood, now wife of Lucas Daniel Grady. She signed with hands that only trembled slightly, watching the ink dry on the yellowish paper. Not quite a lie, not quite the truth, but perhaps enough. Of both to build a future on. "Welcome to Montana married life, Mrs. Grady," the sheriff said kindly, adding his own signature as witness. Lucas's expression remained unreadable as he tucked the certificate into his coat pocket. But when they stepped out into the autumn sunlight, he offered his arm with a quiet courtesy that spoke of better breeding than his rough clothes suggested. "Ready to see our new home?" he asked. "Our," such a simple word to carry so much weight. "Yes," Evelyn said, taking his arm. "I believe I am." The foreman's house proved larger than Lucas had described, a sturdy two-room structure with a deep porch and windows that caught the morning light. Still, those first days of sharing space felt like a careful dance between strangers, each hyper-aware of the other's presence. Evelyn found herself studying Lucas's habits as if reading a foreign language. He rose before dawn, returning from morning chores to find coffee brewing. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, him at one end of the table, her at the other. He never left dirty boots in the house, never failed to knock before entering. Her bedroom, now his storage space, while he slept in the main room. It was during their first proper meal together, a simple stew she'd managed not to ruin, that she discovered the spoons. "These are beautiful," she said, running her finger along the smooth handle decorated with intricate wildflowers. "They can't be from the general store." Lucas focused on his bowl. "Made them. Winters get long out here." She examined the spoon more closely. Each petal was perfectly rendered, the grain of the wood flowing like water. "You're an artist." "No." The word came sharp. "Softer," he added. "Just something my grandfather taught me. Keeps the hands busy when the mind needs quiet." Later, that evening, she found his workbench in the lean-to, tools laid out with surgical precision. Wooden shavings curled like autumn leaves around half-finished pieces. Spoons, yes, but also delicate boxes, picture frames. Even a small horse mid-gallop. "My mother collected carved animals," she offered when he found her there. "I always wondered how someone could see such life in a block of wood." Lucas picked up the horse, thumb tracing its flowing mane. "Wood already knows what it wants to be, just needs patience to find it." He hesitated, then held out the carving. "Keep it, if you like." The gesture touched her more than grand promises ever had. This quiet man with his careful hands offering beauty carved from solitude. Their days fell into rhythm. She learned to cook on the temperamental stove, to stretch provisions through lean times. He taught her to read weather in the clouds, to predict frost from the way the cattle huddled. They worked side by side, mending fences, her city-soft hands growing calloused and sure. At night, she'd sometimes wake to the soft scrape of knife on wood, watching through the doorway as Lucas bent over his workbench, crafting delicate things by lamplight. His face in those moments held a peace she never saw in daylight. "My grandfather could turn a piece of pine into a lace handkerchief," he told her one evening, showing her how to hold the carving knife. Said art wasn't just for rich folks in fancy galleries. Said beauty belongs wherever you can find it. What happened to him? Died in the war, Confederate side. Lucas's hands stilled. Father never forgave him for choosing that fight. Never forgave me for learning his craft either. Called it waste of a working man's time. It's not a waste. She touched one of the spoons, its handle wrapped in carved grapevines. "Beauty feeds something in us, same as bread." He gave her a long look. "You sound like my mother." "I'll take that as high praise, from what I've read in her Bible." The moment. Stretched between them, comfortable as the quilt she'd brought from Boston. Then Lucas cleared his throat. Best check the stock before dark. But that night, she found a new spoon by her plate, its handle carved with roses so delicate they seemed ready to bloom. She didn't thank him, knew it would only make him uncomfortable. but she used it every day, watching his small smile when he noticed. Slowly, the house filled with these quiet offerings. A frame for her father's photograph, a box for her sewing things, each piece telling its own story of patience and care, of beauty found in the margins of hard country living. "You're changing things," he said one morning, watching her hang curtains. She'd sewn from feed sacks, good changes or bad. Lucas considered the yellow flowers she'd embroidered along the hem. Different. "Been a while since this place felt like more than somewhere to sleep. Been a while since I had somewhere to belong," she answered quietly. He nodded, understanding what she didn't say. They were building something here, shaped by necessity, but growing into its own form, like his carvings, waiting to be discovered. In raw wood. Neither of them mentioned love, but perhaps belonging was enough for now. Spring arrived in fits and starts, teasing with warm days that dissolved into sudden snow squalls. But beneath the fickle weather, change crept steadily across. The land. The mail stage brought Lucas's long-awaited seed catalogue, its pages worn from evening readings at the kitchen table. Henderson's 1886 Testing Grounds collection. Evelyn read aloud, fingering the coloured illustrations of impossible vegetables, tomatoes big as teacups, lettuce heads fuller than Sunday bonnets. "Can things really grow so large out here?" Lucas traced a work-roughened finger down columns of careful text. "Soil's good when you can keep it watered. Previous foreman never bothered much with gardens. You thought it women's work." He glanced at her. "But with two of us now," she understood his unspoken question. "I've never grown anything but window boxes, but I'm willing to learn." "Might be nice," he said quietly, "having fresh vegetables come. Summer, maybe even flowers." The catalogue became their evening ritual. They planned carefully, accounting for the short growing season and temperamental weather. Lucas sketched garden plots in the margins, while Evelyn calculated seed quantities and copied planting instructions in her neat hand. Grandfather kept. "A garden like this," Lucas admitted one night, showing her how to design companion plantings. "Said you could read a person's character by how they tended their soil. And what will our garden say about us?" His eyes crinkled slightly. "That we're either foolishly optimistic or surprisingly practical, maybe both." When the order arrived, packets of possibility wrapped in brown paper, they worked side by side, breaking ground. Lucas's strength turned the soil while Evelyn followed, pulling rocks and roots. The work was harder than she'd imagined, but satisfying in a bone-deep way her finishing school had never prepared her for. "Your father would be scandalized," Lucas observed, watching her attack a particularly stubborn root with unladylike determination. "Boston debutante covered in Montana dirt." "Boston debutante is dead and buried," she replied, winning her battle. With the root. "I prefer Montana dirt to Boston parlors these days." Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe, or understanding. He showed her how to test soil readiness by squeezing it in her palm, how to read the angle of sun across their careful rows. His hands covered hers as she pressed the first seeds into warm earth, demonstrating the proper depth. "Like this," he murmured, and for a moment she felt the heat of him all along her back, his breath stirring her hair. Then he stepped away, leaving a curious emptiness behind. They planted through the last frost warnings, sturdy peas and patient potatoes, hopeful carrots and cautious onions. Evelyn insisted on marigolds between the vegetables, remembering her mother's advice about natural pest control. Lucas said nothing, but she caught him studying the flower illustrations in the catalogue late at night. The work changed them both. Her hands grew stronger, nails permanently rimmed with soil despite evening scrubbing. His silences grew more comfortable, less a wall than a shared peace. They moved together with increasing ease, anticipating each other's needs without words. One evening, she found him carving again, not spoons this time, but delicate garden markers. Each bore a different design. A carrot with feathery tops, a pea pod bursting with promise, a marigold in full bloom. "So we remember what we planted where," he explained gruffly, not meeting her eyes. But she saw the care in each tiny detail. The way he'd captured the curl of each leaf. "They're perfect," she said simply, and his shoulders relaxed. The next morning she woke to find the garden transformed. The markers stood like tiny sentinels over their rows, catching dawn light on their carved surfaces. She thought of the catalogue's coloured pictures, still bright with possibility on their kitchen table, and the careful plans they'd drawn together. "It's alive," Lucas said behind her, making her jump. He was studying the newly turned earth where the first brave pea shoots had broken through overnight. Soil remembers what it's meant for, once you remind it. Like people, she thought but didn't say. Give them purpose, care, a chance to grow, and they remember who they're meant to be. Instead, she said, "We should celebrate. I could make biscuits." His smile was quick but real. "Dangerous proposition, Mrs. Grady. I'm improving," she protested, but smiled back. They both remembered last week's burned offerings. "That you are." He touched one of the carved markers gently. "That you are." Looking at their garden in the morning light, Evelyn realized they were planting more than vegetables. They were growing something else, something as fragile and promising as the green shoots breaking through dark earth. Neither of them was ready to name it yet, but like their careful seeds, it only needed time and tending to bloom. Summer arrived with savage beauty, painting the prairie in wild roses and meadowlark song, but beneath the season's warmth, trouble brewed like distant thunder. Cattle barons were pushing smaller ranches out, fencing off water rights that had been shared for generations. Lucas came home later each evening, his face etched with worry lines. It was during one of these late nights when sleep eluded her that Evelyn finally opened Richard's metal box. She'd been avoiding it, letting the past rest while she built this new life. But something in Lucas's tension today, the way he'd studied the horizon during dinner, scanning for dust clouds that meant riders approaching, pushed her to seek answers. The journal was wrapped in oilcloth, partially protecting it from the fire that had claimed its owner. Richard's handwriting filled the pages, neat and precise as a banker's ledger, which she discovered as she read wasn't far wrong. "My dearest Elizabeth," the first entry began, and Evelyn's heart stopped. She read it again, the name burning into her vision. Elizabeth, not Evelyn. Her hands trembled as she turned pages, piecing together a story she'd never suspected. Richard Blackwood hadn't been a simple homesteader seeking a mail-order bride. He'd been an agent for Eastern banking interests, buying up distressed ranch lands, manipulating water rights, creating artificial shortages that forced smaller spreads to sell. And Elizabeth, his wife in Boston, not his intended bride in Montana, had been his partner in it all. "The plan proceeds perfectly," he'd written 3 days before his death. "Once the Larson spread fails, the entire valley will be ripe for consolidation. The marriage scheme provides perfect cover. What better way to appear a legitimate settler than to send for an innocent bride? Miss Harper's arrival will cement my position just as the final pieces fall into place." Evelyn's vision blurred. She'd been nothing but a prop in his scheme, a convenient fiction to hide his true purpose. The marriage papers Lucas had arranged, making her Richard's widow, now felt like a noose around her neck. "You should be sleeping." Lucas's voice from the doorway made her jump. He stood half in shadow, watching her with unreadable eyes. "Did you know?" The words came out raw. "About Richard's real business here?" His silence was answer enough. "How long?" She gripped the journal until her knuckles whitened. "How long have you known what I was walking into?" "Suspected from the start. Confirmed it 2 weeks ago." He moved into the room, moonlight catching the new silver threading his temples. "Found letters in town, started putting pieces together. Was trying to figure out how to tell you. I trusted you. You still can." He reached for the journal, but she pulled it back. Like Richard's neighbors trusted him while he planned their destruction. Bitterness coated her tongue. "I was meant to be his smokescreen, his respectable frontier wife, while he ruined people's lives. You weren't part of his scheme, wasn't I?" The perfect innocent bride, too naive to question where the money came from. She laughed, a broken sound. And now I'm the grieving widow, inheriting his blood money. Evelyn. Just her name, but something in his voice made her look up. You're not responsible for his choices? No. Then whose choices am I responsible for? She stood, journal clutched to her chest. I married you for protection, for respectability. How is that any different from what Richard planned? Pain flickered across his face. There and gone. You don't think that's all this is, isn't it? Another convenient arrangement, another way to look respectable while... She stopped, horror dawning. The land you're buying, the loan from the bank. Tell me you're not part of their scheme. I'm not. His voice was fierce. Everything I told you about this place, about wanting to work it proper, that was true. How can I believe you? But even as she said it, she knew it in the garden markers he'd carved, in the careful way he tested soil between his fingers, in the plans they'd drawn together over that worn seed catalogue. Lucas took a step closer, then stopped as she flinched. I've never lied to you, Evelyn, not about anything that matters. Richard's journal changes everything. Once people know what he was really doing here, they'll come looking for answers. Lucas's face hardened. Already are. Cattle barons getting nervous about who else might know their plans. He glanced out the window, checking the darkness. We need to be careful, very careful. We, the word hung between them, weighted with question. Unless you're planning to leave. His voice was carefully neutral, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. Evelyn looked down at the journal, at the evidence of Richard's betrayal, then at the home she'd built here. Their garden growing strong, the carved spoons in their kitchen, the life they'd started crafting together. No, she said. Finally, I'm not leaving, but we need to decide what to do with these secrets before they burn us both. Dawn found them at the kitchen table, Richard's papers spread before them like a web of deceit. At the center lay a surveyor's map, its careful ink lines revealing what the cattle barons had really been fighting over. Coal, Lucas said, tracing. The peculiar markings Richard had added in the margins. These formations here, black gold, just waiting to be dug. Every homestead they've burned out sits on a piece of it. Evelyn studied the map, remembering the careful notes in Richard's journal. He wasn't just consolidating ranches for grazing rights. He was securing mineral claims for the eastern banks. Smart plan. Lucas's voice held grudging admiration. Buy the land cheap from struggling ranchers, force out those who won't sell, then wait for the railroad to discover what's underneath. They'd make millions. People died for this. Her finger rested on the X marking Richard's burned homestead. Are dying still. Lucas was quiet a moment, then said, Larson family lost their youngest boy last month. Everybody said it was a riding accident, but he probably saw something he shouldn't have. Evelyn felt sick. Like Richard did? Maybe. Or maybe Richard got greedy, wanted a bigger cut. He gathered the papers carefully. Question is, what do we do with this knowledge? We could take it to the sheriff. Sheriff's a good man, but he answers to the county commission. And half the commissioners are deep in the cattle baron's pockets. Lucas's scar stood out white against his tanned jaw. Law's not always justice out here. A horse nickered outside, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. They moved as one. Lucas sweeping the papers into Richard's box, Evelyn heading for the door. Mrs. Grady, Marcus Wade's oily voice, preceded him onto their porch. The cattle baron's son wore eastern clothes that looked out of place against the prairie backdrop. And Mr. Grady. How domestic, Mr. Wade. Evelyn forced a smile. What brings you out so early? Business, my dear, always business. His eyes slid past her to Lucas. Father's concerned about some rumors, things that might upset our peaceful valley. Valley stopped being peaceful when you started burning people out, Lucas said quietly. Wade's smile thinned. Careful, Grady. That's dangerous talk from a man with so much to lose. His gaze swept the garden, the house, lingering on Evelyn. Amazing how quickly a simple ranch hand acquired such comfortable circumstances. If you're implying something, Say it plain." Lucas's voice had gone deadly soft, just expressing concern. After all, Mrs. Grady here is Richard Blackwood's widow, and Richard— Wade paused delicately. "Well, he was involved in certain sensitive matters. We wouldn't want his widow troubled." Were difficult questions. The threat hung clear in the morning air. Evelyn felt Lucas tense beside her. "I appreciate your concern," she said smoothly, channeling every society lesson she'd ever learned. "But I'm afraid Richard kept his business. Matters private. I was only his intended, after all, never his wife in truth." "No?" Wade's smile turned predatory. "Yet you inherited his claim. Curious arrangement." "The law's clear on widows' rights," Lucas cut in. "Even out here, laws can be reinterpreted." Wade adjusted his silk cravat. "Especially when fraud might be involved. Mail-order brides, convenient marriages. People might question such things. Best be careful whose claims you choose to press." He touched his hat brim and turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Mrs. Grady, if you happen to find any of Richard's papers in the ruins, Father would be most interested in purchasing them. For sentimental value, of course." They watched him ride away, dust settling in his wake. Only when he was out of sight did Evelyn realize she was shaking. "He knows," she whispered, "about Richard's papers, about our marriage. All of it. He suspects. Doesn't know for certain." Lucas's arm slipped around her waist, steadying her. "Otherwise, we'd be having a different conversation." She leaned into his strength just for a moment. "What do we do? Hide the papers somewhere safe, then start watching our backs?" His arm tightened briefly. "I won't let them drive us out, Evelyn." She turned to face him, seeing the worry beneath his calm exterior. "Because of the land. Because this is our home." His eyes held hers. "Unless you're having second thoughts about staying." The question carried more weight than just their immediate danger. Evelyn thought of Wade's threats, of Richard's betrayal, of all the easy paths she could have taken. Instead of this one, "No," she said firmly. "No second thoughts. Whatever comes, we face it together." Something eased in Lucas's expression. He nodded once, then headed to the barn to check their property lines. Evelyn watched him go, knowing they'd crossed some invisible boundary in their careful arrangement. The map on their table showed coal seams and property lines, but the real wealth here, she was beginning to realize, had nothing to do with what lay beneath the earth. The cattle broke through at dawn, a sea of angry beasts trampling their south pasture. Lucas found the fence posts first, not broken by livestock pressure, but cleanly sawn through at the base. Wade's calling card, written in splintered wood. "And ruined grass, 30 posts." Evelyn counted, kneeling beside one. Her fingers traced the clean angle of the cut. This wasn't random destruction. They took their time, planned it. Lucas coiled the fallen wire, his movements precise with suppressed rage. "They're escalating, testing how much we can take." Around them, their carefully tended grass lay churned to mud. The garden, thank God, had been spared, though hoofprints came within yards of their spring plantings. The message was clear. Next time, nothing would be safe. "We can rebuild," Evelyn said, lifting one of the cut posts. The wood was still solid, bearing Lucas's careful marks where he'd measured and set it last spring. "They haven't broken us yet." He took the post from her hands, studied the precise cut. "No, but they will keep coming until they do, or until we give them what they want." She pulled Richard's journal from her pocket. "The evidence, we could burn it, walk away from the whole mess." But they both knew they wouldn't. Not with the Larson boys' death unavenged, not with other small ranchers facing the same pressure they were. The day stretched long and hot as they worked to repair. The fence line. Evelyn's hands blistered, then bled, then calloused as she helped Lucas set new posts. He showed her how to string the wire, how to test the tension by sound. A sharp ping, meaning life or death for cattle that might test it. Near sunset, riders appeared on their boundary line. Wade led them, 5 men spread out in a show of force. "Shame." "About your fence, Grady," he called. "Range cattle can be so destructive. Lucky no one was hurt." Lucas's hands tightened on the post he was setting. Evelyn touched his arm, feeling the trembling tension in his muscles. "Perhaps," she called back pleasantly, "you'd care to help us repair the damage, since they were your cattle after all." Wade's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Mrs. Grady, how could you be sure of that? Cattle all look alike, especially in the dark." He urged his horse closer. "Though I hear you're becoming quite the rancher's wife. Amazing what a woman can learn, given proper motivation." The implied insult hung in the air. Lucas took a step forward, but Evelyn's grip tightened. "I've learned a great deal, Mr. Wade," she said, voice carrying clearly. "About cattle, about range laws." She paused deliberately. "About mineral rights and bank fraud." Wade's smile vanished. Behind him, his men shifted uneasily. "Dangerous topics for a lady," he said softly. "Especially one with such a complicated marriage history. Everything I know, I learned from my late husband's papers." Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "He was quite thorough in his record-keeping. I imagine the banks back east would be very interested in some of his observations." "You're bluffing." But Wade's face had lost its arrogant certainty. "Blackwood's papers burned with him." "Did they?" She smiled, channeling every society party she'd ever attended. How fortunate that a good wife keeps copies of her husband's important documents. Insurance, you understand. Lucas had gone very still beside her. Wade's men looked to their boss, waiting for direction. "You should be careful, Mrs. Grady." Wade's voice had turned ugly. "Accidents happen so easily out here. Posts get cut, fires start. Sometimes people disappear, like the Larson boy." Lucas's quiet words cut through the tension. "Or are we still pretending that was a riding accident?" Wade's hand dropped to his gun belt. "Watch your mouth, Grady." "Or what?" Lucas stepped forward, breaking Evelyn's grip. "You'll burn us out too. Add us to your list of convenient accidents." For a long moment, violence hung in the air, like lightning about to strike. Then Wade laughed, a hollow sound. "Just trying to be neighborly, offering friendly warnings." He reined his horse around. "Think about what you really want to protect here, Mrs. Grady. Land can be replaced. Lives." He let the threat trail off. They watched the riders disappear into the gathering dusk. Only when they were gone did Evelyn realize she was shaking. Lucas picked up the broken fence post, studying the clean cut that had started all this. "We can't. Back down now." "No." She took the post from him, ran her fingers over its solid length. "But we can be smarter than they expect. Richard's papers aren't our only weapon." He looked at her questioningly. "We have something they don't understand." She gestured to their shared work, the mended fence, the protected garden, the home they'd built together. "We have a reason to fight that's worth more than coal or cattle." Lucas's hand covered hers on the post, warm and calloused and sure. They stood together as darkness settled over their land, the fence line stretching before them like a declaration of war. Winter descended like a hammer, driving temperatures so low the creek froze solid and frost painted elaborate warnings across their window panes. The world contracted to the space between hearth and barn, each journey outside a battle against cutting wind and treacherous ice. Evelyn found the quilt pieces while clearing space in the root cellar. Squares of fabric carefully cut, but never sewn, tucked away in an old trunk with threading needles and spools of sturdy cotton. "My mother's," Lucas said when she showed him that evening. "She was always planning to finish it." His fingers traced the fabrics, faded calico, sturdy ticking, even a piece of silk that must have cost dear. "Winter project," she said. "But then she got sick, and he didn't finish. Didn't need to." That night, Evelyn spread the pieces across their kitchen table, arranging patterns in the lamplight. Lucas watched from his carving bench, his knife moving steadily across a new piece of wood. "I could finish it," she offered. "If you wouldn't mind." His hands stilled. "You know how?" "My grandmother taught me, said every bride should know how to stitch warmth into a home." She sorted blues from browns, lights from darks. "Though I doubt she imagined me using the skill quite like this." The quilt became their evening ritual as winter deepened. While Lucas carved or mended tack, Evelyn pieced together the fragments of his mother's dream. Sometimes he told stories. As she worked, memories of his mother singing hymns while she sewed, of falling asleep under quilts heavy with love and protection. "She would have liked you," he said one night, watching Evelyn's needle flash in the firelight. "Would have appreciated someone who understands that beauty isn't just decoration." The words warmed her more than the fire. They did that sometimes. Now, offered pieces of themselves in the quiet hours, building something neither dared name. The storm hit 3 days before Christmas, howling out of the north like God's own fury. They spent hours fighting their way between house and barn, keeping livestock alive through the brutal cold. When a half-frozen calf needed constant tending, Lucas insisted on sleeping in the barn. "Don't be ridiculous," Evelyn said, struggling to close the door against the wind. "You'll freeze to death out there. Survived worse. You don't have to." The words came out before she could catch them. "There's room enough by the fire." He stilled, watching her with unreadable eyes. They'd maintained their careful separation all these months, him on his pallet in the main room, her in the bedroom, propriety preserved despite their paper marriage. "Evelyn, we're both adults," she said firmly, "and I'm not having your death by foolish pride on my conscience." Later, she would remember every detail of that evening. The wind's mournful keening, the crack of frozen trees, the way Lucas moved through their darkened house with careful courtesy. He laid his blankets well away from her quilting space near the fire, but the room was small enough that she could hear each breath, feel the shift in air when he moved. Sleep proved elusive. The storm threw snow against their windows like handfuls of sand, and beneath it she caught the quiet sounds of Lucas's restlessness. "Tell me about your mother," she said finally into the firelit dark. "What was her name?" "Sarah." His voice came soft, thoughtful. "Sarah Grace Montgomery Grady. She loved wild roses and morning glories. Said they reminded her that beauty could grow anywhere if you gave it half a chance." Like their garden, Evelyn thought, remembering the careful plans they'd drawn together. Like the spoons he carved, the quilt she was finishing, beauty carved from necessity, blooming in unexpected places. What would she think? The question slipped out. About this? Lucas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She always said real love was in the doing, not the saying, in the choice to build something together, even when it's hard." Evelyn's hands found a piece of the quilt, fingers tracing the careful stitches she'd made. "Is that what we're doing, building something real?" The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the storm raged on, but in here, time seemed to hold its breath. "Evelyn." Just her name, but the way he said it made her heart stutter. She heard him move, felt him kneel beside her in the firelight. His hand covered hers where it lay on the quilt, warm and certain. "I think we've been building something real since the day you walked into my life." She turned her hand under his, laced their fingers together. Even though it started as convenience, maybe because of that, his thumb traced her palm. No fancy promises, no false expectations, just two people choosing each other day by day. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like spring. Thaw after winter's long night, like finding the pattern in scattered pieces of cloth and knowing exactly how they fit together. The quilt lay forgotten between them, but its promise remained. Warmth drawn from fragments, beauty born of necessity, love stitched one careful piece at a time. Spring's first hints of warmth brought the traditional clearing of winter's accumulation. Evelyn was in the attic, sorting through boxes of Lucas's mother's things they'd stored away during the cold months, when she found the photographs wrapped in faded silk. The first showed a grand house, its columned facade speaking of old money and older traditions. On the steps stood a family, father in a fine suit, mother in silk, 3 children arranged like perfect china dolls. The youngest boy's face stopped her heart. Lucas, perhaps 12, but unmistakable despite the formal clothes and unlined face. "Found those, did you?" She hadn't heard him climb the attic stairs. He stood in the doorway now, shoulders tight with something between resignation and relief. "This is you." She touched the photograph gently. "In Virginia? Richmond." He settled beside her on the dusty floor, close enough that their shoulders touched. Before the war changed everything. More photographs spilled from the silk wrapping. Lucas as a young man in university dress, his mother in a garden full of roses, his father behind a massive desk, authority in every line of his bearing. "You were gentry," she said softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Lucas Grady, son of Judge William Montgomery Grady, died in 1870. His voice held old pain. "The man who came west was just Lucas, ranch hand and carpenter's apprentice. What happened? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, father was a staunch Union man. Grandfather fought for the Confederacy. When Richmond fell, everything fell with it." His fingers traced the outline of the grand house. Father tried to protect grandfather from prosecution, but there were paper trails, evidence of supplying Confederate troops. When they came to arrest him, I helped him escape. Understanding dawned. You chose your grandfather over your father's. Loyalty. Chose family over politics. But father didn't see it that way. Lucas's jaw tightened. Said if I couldn't honor his principles, I wasn't his son. So I left. Followed grandfather west. Learned his trade, his art. When he died, I kept moving. Easier than staying anywhere long enough for the past to catch up. Evelyn studied the photographs. The wealth, the position, the life he'd walked away from. Do you regret it? Leaving Richmond? No. Losing my father's respect? Every day. He picked up another photograph, this one showing his mother in the library, of that grand house. She tried to reconcile us, but father was adamant. When she got sick, he wouldn't even let me come home to say goodbye. But she found ways to reach you. Evelyn touched the Bible they'd discovered months ago, the carved spoons that echoed his grandfather's art. She made sure you had pieces of home to carry with you, like she knew I'd need them someday, need to share them with someone who'd understand their worth. His eyes met hers, full of quiet meaning. A floorboard creaked below, followed by the sound of boots on their porch. They both tensed, months of threats having taught them caution. Lucas moved to the attic window while Evelyn gathered the photographs. Wade, he said grimly, and his father this time. Evelyn's hands tightened on them. The images of Lucas's past life. They must have learned something. They wouldn't both come unless they found proof about our marriage. Lucas's face hardened. Or Richard's papers. Fear climbed her throat. What do we do? He turned to her, really looked at her, taking in her dust-smeared dress and work-roughened hands. So different from the society lady in those photographs who might have been his match in another life. That depends, he said quietly, on whether you want to keep fighting. This isn't the life you were meant for, Evelyn. You could still go back east, find something better than... Don't! She cut him off, fierce and certain. Don't you dare offer me an escape now. This is exactly the life I was meant for. These hands... She held them up, showing the calluses, the small burns from cooking, the tiny cuts from quilting. They've learned to build something real, to tend gardens and mend fences and hold on to what matters. She pressed the photographs into his hands. Your past is part of you, Lucas, but it's not all of you, and my future is here, whether Wade and his kind like it or not. The porch steps creaked again. Lucas tucked the photographs away carefully, then pulled her close, pressing his lips to her forehead. Whatever comes through that door, he murmured, we face it together. She straightened her skirts, lifted her chin. Together, she agreed. Now let's go show the Wades what kind of woman you really married. His smile held pride and promise, and a love as solid as the foundations they'd built. Taking her hand, they descended to meet whatever threat waited below. The confrontation with the Wades had ended in a stalemate of veiled threats and careful words, but its aftermath left something shifted between Lucas and Evelyn. That evening, after checking the property's boundaries twice over, Lucas disappeared into his workshop with quiet intensity. Evelyn was mending by lamplight when he returned, his expression holding something she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, mixed with certainty. "My mother wore this for 30 years, he said, opening his palm to reveal a ring. Simple gold, worn smooth with time and love, but the small diamond caught the lamplight like a captured star. Father gave it to her when they had nothing but dreams and determination, before Richmond, before the war, before everything fell apart. Evelyn's hands stilled on her mending. They'd never spoken of rings during their hasty civil ceremony, both understanding it was a marriage of paper and practicality. But now, she slipped it to me that last visit, before Father cut me off completely. Lucas sat beside her, the ring catching light between them, said some things were meant to be passed on when the time was right, when love was real, not just convenient. Lucas. His name came out barely a whisper. "I know what we started as." His voice roughened. "No, it wasn't about love or romance or any of the things you deserved. But somewhere between burned fences and winter storms, between your garden growing and your quilting by firelight," he took her hand, his calluses familiar against her skin. "Somewhere along the way, paper became truth, convenience became choice." Tears pricked her eyes. "When did you know?" "That day you faced down Wade, standing in our ruined pasture. You could have run, could have taken the easy path back east. Instead, you chose to fight, chose us." His thumb traced her empty ring finger. "But I think I started falling the moment you looked at my books and didn't see a simple ranch hand. Pretending at education. I saw you," she said softly. "Just you. The way you gentle horses and craft beauty from wood. The way you read poetry by lamplight and know every constellation in the summer sky. And you?" The question held a lifetime of hope. When did convenience become something more? She thought of all the moments, strung together like beads on a rosary. "That first night, when you left the cabin door unlatched, you trusted me before you had any reason to." Her fingers closed over his, feeling the ring's smooth warmth. "But I think I knew for certain during the blizzard, watching you risk yourself. For that calf, your kindness runs bone deep, Lucas." How could I not love that? His breath caught. It was the first time either had spoken the word aloud. "If I put this ring on your finger," he said carefully, "it changes things, makes our marriage real in ways that could bring more trouble. Wade's threats are nothing compared to what we've already faced." She touched his face, feeling the day's stubble under her palm. "I'm not afraid of trouble, Lucas. I'm only afraid of not living true to what we've become." He studied her face, in the lamplight, as if memorizing every detail. Then, with hands that trembled slightly, he slid the ring onto her finger. A perfect fit, as if Sarah Grady had known all those years ago exactly where her legacy would find its home. "I should have courted you properly," he murmured. "Given you romance instead of necessity." "You did." She smiled through tears. "Every carved spoon, every garden marker, every quiet act of care. You courted me with who you are, not who you were trying to be." When he kissed her, it held none of the hesitation of that first storm-bred kiss. This was certainty and promise, sealed. With his mother's ring and their own hard-won truth. Later, as moonlight painted silver paths across their kitchen floor, Lucas told her stories of his mother wearing this ring, tending roses in Richmond, reading to her children by firelight, keeping faith through war and loss and change. She never took it off, he said softly. Said it reminded her that love isn't in the gold or the diamond, but in the daily choice to build something lasting. Evelyn twisted the ring on her finger, feeling its weight like an anchor to this life they'd chosen. "Like our garden, like your carvings, like everything we've built here." "Yes." He gathered her close, her head finding its place against his shoulder. "And whatever comes, Wade, the cattle barons, the banks, we face it together, not because we have to, but because we choose to." Outside, spring wind rattled their windows and rustled new leaves in their garden. But here, in the quiet of their kitchen, with moonlight blessing their shared space and Sarah's ring binding past to present. They had found their truth. Love built piece by piece, choice by choice, as steady and real as the house that sheltered them. His letter arrived on a perfect summer morning, the kind that made you believe in God's grace. Evelyn found it nailed to their garden gate, the paper expensive, the handwriting elegant, like a society invitation bearing poison. Mrs. Lucas Grady. It began, her married name turned accusation. It has come to our attention that certain irregularities exist regarding your previous marriage to Richard Blackwood. Documentation has emerged suggesting fraud in the marriage license, raising questions about your right to inherit his property claims. Furthermore, evidence indicates your current marriage may have been contracted under false pretenses, rendering it legally void. Lucas read it over her shoulder, his body tense as a drawn bowstring. Wade's getting desperate, moving pieces into place. There's more. She turned the page. In light of these serious matters, the County Commission will hold a hearing next week to review all property claims in the disputed territories. Failure to appear with all relevant documentation will result in immediate forfeiture. Clever. Lucas's voice held grim admiration. They're not burning us out this time. They're using the law itself against us. They want Richard's papers. Evelyn touched her ring, drawing strength from its solid presence. And they want to invalidate our marriage, to break our claim on this land. Can they? She met his eyes steadily. The sheriff backdated those papers. If they look too closely, then we don't let them look. His jaw set in familiar determination. We fight this smart, not just hard. Throughout the day, riders passed their boundaries, Wade's men making sure they got the message. Lucas spent hours in the barn, checking rifles and ammunition. Evelyn rode to town, wearing her best dress and Sarah's ring, to speak with the sheriff. They've got 3 commissioners in their pocket, Sheriff Mills confirmed, his lined face grave. Found interesting documents about Richard's dealings, they say, enough to question everything, your marriage to him, his property claims, even that coal survey. The coal survey they supposedly don't know exists? Evelyn's mind raced. Sheriff, who else knows about Richard's papers? He studied her thoughtfully. Judge Harrison might. He handled Richard's estate, such as it was. The judge's office smelled of leather and law books. Harrison himself, white-haired but sharp-eyed, listened without interruption as Evelyn laid out her suspicions. "Martha," he called to his clerk when she finished, "bring me the Blackwood estate files. All of them." The clerk returned with a thin folder. Too thin. "Someone's been here before us," the judge said softly, rifling through papers. "Recently, by the look of it. Documents missing, including the original marriage license," Evelyn finished. "The one proving Richard and I never actually married, which makes your inheritance of his claim fraudulent." The word tasted bitter, just as Wade's letter claims. But something nagged at her legal-trained mind. "Judge Harrison, did Richard file a will?" "No need. He died intestate, property passing to his widow, you, according to the backdated license. But if that license is proved false, who inherits?" The judge's eyes sharpened. "By law, his next of kin, which would be his wife." Evelyn's heart raced. His real wife. Back in Boston. Elizabeth. Understanding dawned in Harrison's face. Who would have no idea her husband was working for the cattle barons? No idea about the coal, the land grabs, any of it. Unless someone told her. Evelyn stood, purpose burning through her veins. "Judge, I need to send a telegram. And then, I need copies of every document you have left about Richard's estate. Every single one." The sun was setting when she rode home, her saddlebags heavy with possibility. Lucas met her at the gate where they'd found the letter that morning. "You look like you've found hope," he said, helping her down. "Better." She touched his face, loving the way he leaned into her palm. "I've found a way to fight them with their own weapons. But it's dangerous, Lucas. If it goes wrong, then we lose everything." His arms went around her, solid and sure. But if we don't try, we lose anyway. At least this way, we choose our ground. Over his shoulder she saw their garden blooming in the evening light, the house they'd made home, the life they'd built from necessity and grown into love. "I won't let them take this from us," she whispered fiercely. "Not our land, not our marriage, not our truth." "No," he agreed, and she felt his smile against her hair. "We've faced down worse than Wade and his paper threats. Remember that first." "Winter," she laughed despite everything. "You were too stubborn to come in from the barn, and you were too stubborn to let me freeze." His arms tightened. "Still are." The letter in her pocket felt less threatening now, outweighed by the strength of what they'd built together. Let Wade think he had them cornered. He didn't understand what he was really fighting. Not just two people protecting property, but a love forged in fire and tested by storms. They had 1 week to prepare their defense. 1 week to gather allies, strengthen boundaries, and set their own trap. 1 week to prove that sometimes the strongest legal claim was the one written not on paper, but on two hearts bound by choice and circumstance into something unbreakable. The rifle had lain wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of Lucas's trunk since Richmond, its scrollwork and silver inlay speaking of better days. William Montgomery Grady's name was engraved along the barrel, along with the date, 1846. "Father's wedding gift from grandfather," Lucas said, checking the mechanism with practiced hands. "Didn't stop him from disowning both of us in the end, but he couldn't take back what was already given." Evelyn watched him work, the evening sun painting copper highlights in his hair. They'd spent the week fortifying, sending telegrams, gathering supporters, preparing for whatever Wade might bring. Now, the night before the hearing, riders had been spotted near their northern boundary. "They won't wait for the law," she said quietly. "They're coming to make sure we never reach that hearing." 8 riders! Lucas loaded the rifle with careful precision, moving through Thompson's old place, trying to circle around behind us. But they weren't alone. The Larson family had arrived at dusk, remembering their lost son. The Peterson hands, 3 strong, brought extra ammunition and grim determination. Even the sheriff had appeared, unofficial-like, to mention he'd be patrolling this section tonight. "Your telegram reached Elizabeth Blackwood," Harrison's messenger had reported that afternoon. "She's already left Boston, but she won't arrive." Before a shot cracked through the twilight, Lucas moved instantly, pushing Evelyn behind the barn wall. "They're earlier than I expected," he said, rifle ready. "Get to the house. The papers are safe." She gripped his arm. "But I'm not leaving you out here." More shots, closer now. Their allies returned fire from prepared positions. In the growing dark, shadows moved like quicksilver between the trees. "Evelyn," Lucas's voice held steel and silk, "I can't protect you and fight them. Then don't protect me." She drew the pistol he'd taught her to use. "Fight with me." Something like pride flickered in his eyes. Then the night erupted into chaos. Wade's men came from 3 directions, trying to split their defenses. But Lucas had grown up hunting Virginia woodlands, had spent years learning this land's every shadow. He moved like smoke between cover spots, his father's rifle singing out with deadly accuracy. Evelyn stayed close, watching their backs, hearing her finishing school mistress faint dead away at the sight of her firing at men who meant them harm. But this wasn't Boston's gentle society. This was Montana, where you protected what you loved or lost it forever. A bullet splintered wood by her head. Lucas spun, rifle barking, and a cry rang out from the darkness. Then Peterson's oldest boy shouted warning, more riders approaching from the east. "The house!" Lucas commanded, and this time Evelyn didn't argue. They needed to protect Richard's papers, their only legal defense tomorrow. If Wade's men found them, they reached the porch as horses thundered into their yard. But the lead rider's voice rang out with unexpected authority. "Federal marshals, cease fire immediately." The night stilled. In the sudden quiet, Evelyn heard Lucas's sharp intake of breath. Marshal James Baldwin swung down from his horse, lamplight catching his features. He looked exactly like his photograph in Lucas's trunk. older, greyer, but unmistakably his father's brother. "Uncle James," Lucas lowered his rifle slowly. "Mother's telegram reached you 2 days ago." Baldwin's eyes were hard as he surveyed the scene. "Along with some interesting documents about coal rights and land fraud. Seems my sister had one. Last hand to play in protecting her boy." More riders emerged from the dark, federal marshals wearing badges that caught moonlight. Among them, Evelyn spotted Wade and his son, hands bound, faces thunderous. "Found these 2 burning records in the county office," Baldwin continued, "including some interesting marriage licenses and property deeds. Seems they've been busy erasing evidence." "You're too late," Wade's voice dripped venom. "The hearing has been postponed." Baldwin's smile held no warmth. "By order of the federal court, pending a full investigation of land fraud and mineral rights violations. Seems Mrs. Elizabeth Blackwood had quite a story to tell about her husband's activities out here." Evelyn felt Lucas's arm go around her waist, steady and sure. They watched as marshals rounded up Wade's men as the sheriff emerged from shadow to help restore order. Throughout it all, Lucas kept his father's rifle ready, taking no chances until the last rider was secured. Finally, in the false peace of pre-dawn, Baldwin approached them. His eyes fell to the rifle in Lucas's hands, recognition flickering. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly, "of how you've used his gift, of what you've built here." Lucas's fingers tightened on the scrollwork. "He made his choice." "He did. And you made yours." Baldwin gestured to their defended home, their protected land. "Seems to me you chose well." The rifle's silver inlay caught the rising sun as Lucas finally lowered it. Tomorrow would bring federal investigations, legal battles, the slow grinding of justice's wheels. But for now, they had their land, their truth, and each other. "Come inside," Evelyn said to Baldwin. "Let us show you what we've built with your brother's son." Lucas hung his father's rifle in its proper place above the hearth, no longer hidden in shame, but displayed with the pride of heritage, redeemed through love and courage. Its presence spoke not of past battles, but of futures protected and choices vindicated, just like their marriage, Evelyn thought. What had begun as necessity had been forged in fire into something true and lasting, something worth fighting for. The Helena Daily Independent's headline spoke volumes. "Land fraud scheme exposed. Eastern banks, cattle barons implicated in massive coal rights conspiracy." Evelyn smoothed the newspaper on their kitchen table, where morning sun illuminated. The stark black print of justice finally served. Prominent Boston financier Elizabeth Blackwood shocked federal investigators, she read aloud to Lucas, with evidence of her late husband's involvement in a complex scheme to defraud Montana Territory homesteaders. The plot, involving several Eastern banking institutions and local cattle interests, centered around the systematic acquisition of land containing valuable coal deposits. Lucas stood behind her chair, one hand resting on her shoulder as he read along. They'd lived this story, but seeing it in print made it suddenly undeniably real. Mrs. Blackwood expressed deep remorse, Evelyn continued, for her husband's actions, stating, "Richard's betrayal extends beyond our marriage to encompass an entire community. The least I can do is help make it right." The article detailed everything: the falsified water rights, the strategic fires, the pressure on small ranchers. Even the Larson boy's death was mentioned, no longer dismissed as accident, but listed among the conspiracy's casualties. She signed over all mineral rights to a community trust, Lucas noted, indicating a smaller article below the main story. "Proceeds to benefit the families affected by the land grabs. It won't bring back what was lost." Evelyn touched the mention of Richard's death, feeling the strange weight of what might have been. "But it's something like justice." "Speaking of justice," Lucas placed another paper beside the newspaper. A letter bearing the federal court's seal. "Uncle James sent this over. They've confirmed our marriage as legal and binding. No one can challenge our claim now." Evelyn traced their names on the document, remembering that first hasty ceremony. We should celebrate properly this time, the way we should have from the start, with a real wedding, with a reaffirmation." She turned to face him. "Not because we need it, but because we choose it. Because what began as necessity has grown into something worth declaring to the world." His smile held all the quiet joy she'd come to cherish. "I'd like that." Later that afternoon, they walked their property boundaries together, seeing their land with new eyes. The garden bloomed riotously, summer's abundance spilling over careful rows. Their repaired fences stood straight and true against the horizon. Even the scars of past battles, burned posts, bullet-marked walls, had been mended and made stronger. "Wade's boy turned state's evidence," Lucas said as they paused by the creek, "telling everything he knows about his father's dealings. Sheriff says he looked almost relieved, like he'd been waiting for a chance to break free." "Sometimes," Evelyn mused, "it takes losing everything to find your true path." She thought of her own journey from Boston bride to Montana rancher's wife. "Though I prefer finding it through love rather than law." Lucas pulled her close, his heart steady under her cheek. "When did you know," he asked softly, "that this was your true path?" She considered the question carefully. "That first night in your cabin, when I saw your books." "No, earlier, when you left the door unlatched, trusting me before you had reason to." She smiled against his shirt. "But I think I truly knew during that blizzard, watching you risk yourself for a stranger's calf. When I realized that your kindness wasn't a mask or a strategy, but bone-deep truth. For me, it was the garden." His voice rumbled in his chest. "Watching you fight that root like it had personally offended you. So different from the proper Boston lady I'd expected, and so much more real." The newspaper in her pocket crinkled as she moved closer. "Tomorrow, it would be used to line drawer bottoms or start fires, its news becoming history. But its words had transformed their private victory into public vindication, their personal truth into documented fact. "We should frame it," she decided. "The article. Hang it beside your father's rifle over the hearth, as a reminder, as a testament." She touched her ring, his mother's legacy warm against her skin, to how love can grow from the hardest ground, to how truth prevails if you fight for it long enough. Lucas gathered her closer, and together they watched the sun paint their land in evening gold. The newspaper might tell the world about justice served and wrongs righted, but it couldn't capture this moment, this quiet triumph of two hearts that had found each other against all odds. "Remember what your mother wrote?" Evelyn asked softly. "About grace being found in small things?" "She would have loved this," Lucas murmured. "Our garden, our home, our truth finally told." "Our love," Evelyn added, feeling his smile against her hair. The newspaper might preserve their story for history, but their real victory was written in smaller texts, in carved spoons and garden markers, in fence posts mended together, in quiet moments of choosing each other day after day, in all the humble, holy ways that necessity had bloomed into love's lasting truth. The house plans spread across their kitchen table like a dream taking shape. Lucas's precise drawings showed every detail: the expanded kitchen with space for Evelyn's bread-making, the library with built-in shelves for their growing book collection, the wraparound porch where they could watch sunset paint the prairie gold. "Your grandfather taught you this too?" Evelyn traced the architectural renderings, marveling at their intricacy. "Some." Lucas adjusted a measurement with careful strokes. "Learned more from Peterson's foreman. Said if I was going to work wood, might as well learn to dream big." The plans had started small, just ideas for expanding their existing home. But like everything between them, it had grown into something larger, something that spoke of permanence and possibility. "The community's coming tomorrow," Evelyn reminded him. "Larson's bringing his crew, Peterson's lending his team, even Widow. Chen's promised to feed everyone." It still amazed her, this outpouring of support. After the newspaper article broke the conspiracy wide open, their neighbors had emerged from fear's long shadow. What Wade had tried to break through intimidation, he'd actually forged stronger through shared resistance. Morning brought wagons rolling in from every direction. Men with tools and timber, women with food and determination. Children darted between. Adults' legs, turning work into celebration. The Larson boys' younger sister brought seedlings from their greenhouse. "For your new kitchen garden," she said shyly. Lucas organized work crews with quiet efficiency, his architectural plans becoming reality under many hands. Evelyn moved between groups, directing traffic and distributing Widow Chen's dumplings. Everywhere, she heard snippets of conversation, people sharing their own stories of Wade's intimidation, of resistance, of survival. "Never thought we'd see justice," old Peterson said, watching his sons raise a wall. "Your stand gave us all courage." "Mrs. Grady, we just did what was right," she demurred. "No." His weathered face was serious. "You did more. You showed us that right could win, that standing together matters more than standing alone." By noon, the house's new bones reached skyward. Lucas worked alongside the other men, his shirt dark with honest sweat. Sometimes she caught him pausing, watching their community rebuild with an expression that made her heart ache sweetly. "Your father should see you now," James Baldwin said. Having ridden out to observe the work, leading men, building something lasting, he made his choice. Lucas replied, but the old bitterness had faded. "And I made mine." Still, Baldwin handed over a telegram. "Might be interested in this." Evelyn watched Lucas read it, saw emotion flicker across his face. When he handed it to her, hands slightly unsteady, she understood why. "Your mother's roses still bloom," the message read. "The library keeps her books ready. When you and your wife are settled, there's a place for you both here." "Father, will you go?" she asked softly. Lucas looked around at their half-built walls, their gathered community, their land stretching green and promise-filled to the horizon. "This is home," he said simply. "But maybe, come spring, we could visit. Show him what we've built here." She tucked the telegram into her pocket, a bridge between past and future. Around them, work continued. Men raising rafters, women planning interior details, children planting Larson's seedlings in freshly turned earth. Miss Harper, that was, Widow Chen called, using her old name with fond remembrance. "Come tell me where you want your cook stove. A good kitchen needs proper planning." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Lucas's architectural plans became dog-eared as different crews consulted them, adding their own expertise. The library's shelves took shape under Peterson's oldest boy's careful hands. The porch posts were carved with subtle designs, morning glories and wild roses, Lucas's tribute to his mother's memory. As sunset painted their new walls gold, the community gathered for a shared meal. Tables groaned under covered dishes, laughter, mixed with talk of future barn raisings and harvest help. Children played tag between adults' legs, while babies slept in makeshift cradles. "Look what we've built," Evelyn murmured to Lucas as they stood on their newly finished porch. "Not just walls and rooms, but connections. Community." He drew the plans from his pocket, studied them in the fading light. "Things rarely turn out exactly as we draw them." "No," she smiled, remembering their own carefully planned arrangement, how love had redrawn those lines. "Sometimes they turn out better." Below them, someone started playing a fiddle. Pairs of dancers formed on the packed earth of their yard, celebrating life's victory over fear, community's triumph over isolation. "Shall we?" Lucas held out his hand, his mother's ring catching sunset fire on her finger. They danced as twilight settled over their renewed home, their expanded family, their love built piece by piece like the walls rising sure and strong around them. The architectural plans in Lucas's pocket had shown them how to build a house, but their hearts had shown them how to build a home. The traveling photographer set up his equipment in their garden, where summer blooms rivaled Evelyn's wedding dress for glory. Not the ash-stained silk from Boston, but a new creation Widow Chen had helped her make, incorporating lace from Lucas's mother's collection. "Hold still now," the photographer instructed, ducking under his black cloth. "This moment we're capturing. It's not just for you, but for generations to come." Evelyn felt Lucas's arm steady around her waist, his hand covering hers where Sarah's ring caught morning light. Behind them stood their expanded family, James Baldwin looking proud enough to burst, Peterson and his sons in their Sunday best, the Larsons with healing grief in their eyes, Widow Chen arranging everyone with gentle authority, the flash powder, popped, fixing their image for posterity. But Evelyn knew the real picture was bigger than silver nitrate could capture. It was in the garden blooming around them, the new house rising proud behind them. The community gathered to celebrate, not just a wedding, but a victory of love over fear, of truth over deception. "Another," the photographer called, "just the happy couple this time." Lucas turned her slightly, adjusting their pose, and she remembered that first careful dance of strangers sharing space. Now his touch was familiar as heartbeat, necessary as breath. "Think we got it right this time," he murmured, gentle humor in his voice. "We got it right the first time," she answered softly. "We just needed time to realize it." The ceremony itself was everything their first hasty wedding wasn't, not because it made their marriage more real, but because it let them celebrate what it had become. Judge Harrison officiated, his words speaking not of legal contracts, but of love's quiet power to transform necessity into choice. "These two came together in darkness," he said, looking out over the gathered community, "but found light in each other. Their courage in standing against injustice helped heal this valley. Their love, grown from practical roots into something profound, reminds us that the strongest bonds are often those forged in adversity." Evelyn's new ring, chosen together this time, though she'd never take off Sarah's, slid onto her finger beside its companion. Lucas's hands trembled slightly as she placed his band, the simple gold warm from resting near her heart. "Not because we have to," she whispered their private vow, "but because we choose to." He completed it, voice rough with emotion. The celebration sprawled across their property like a flower unfurling. Tables groaned under covered dishes, children played tag between adult legs, and music wove everything together. Even the weather celebrated, painting the sky in summer's finest blue. The photographer moved through it all, capturing moments like treasure, the Larson girl placing a wildflower crown on Evelyn's head, Lucas showing Peterson's youngest boy how to hold a carving knife, James Baldwin dancing with Widow Chen while others clapped in rhythm. But it was the main portrait that would hang above their fireplace for decades to come, the two of them surrounded by their chosen family, their shared victory, their love made visible in every detail. The garden Lucas had helped her plant, the house they'd designed together, the community that had become part of their story. "Your father would have loved this," James said later, studying the developing plates. "All of it, the house, the garden, the way you've built something real here. Maybe he'll see it himself come spring," Lucas answered, and Evelyn heard the healing in his voice. Some breaks, like some marriages, needed time to reveal their strength, as evening painted their world. In golden light, Lucas led her onto their new porch. Below, the celebration continued, but up here they found a moment of quiet to absorb it all. "Look what we've built," he said, echoing her words from months ago. His arm around her waist was sure, claiming, chosen. She leaned into him, remembering that first night in his cabin, when trust had been a door left unlatched and love had been an unspoken possibility. "I see it," she said softly, "in every carved spoon and planted seed, in every fence post mended and battle fought, in every choice we made to stay, to fight, to build something true." The photographer's flash caught them in that moment, an unplanned shot that would become their favorite. Just the two of them on their porch, silhouetted against the setting sun, their shadows stretching out before them like a road into tomorrow. Below, someone called for music, for dancing, for more celebration of life's victory over fear, love's triumph over convenience. Lucas held out his hand, his mother's ring catching light on her finger, his new band gleaming with promise. "Shall we join our family?" he asked. Evelyn took his hand, feeling the future unfold before them like their garden reaching for the sun. "Always," she said, and led him down to dance. Spring came again to Montana, painting their world in colors of promise. Wild roses climbed the porch posts Lucas had carved with such care, while morning glories, his mother's favorites, twined through the garden fence. The house they'd built together stood proud against the prairie sky, its windows catching sunrise like benediction. Evelyn knelt in their kitchen garden, carefully transplanting the first seedlings of the season. The soil felt alive under her, hands rich with possibility. Behind her, she heard the steady rhythm of Lucas's carving. He was working on a cradle, though they hadn't spoken that hope aloud yet. Some dreams, like some flowers, needed quiet time to root before blooming. "Letter from Richmond," he called from the porch, and she sat back on her heels, brushing earth from her hands. The envelope bore his father's precise handwriting. Inside, pressed flowers fell like memories into her lap, roses from his mother's garden, still carrying the ghost of their color. "He's kept them blooming," Lucas said softly, settling beside her in the dirt, propriety long forgotten between them. "All these years, like your mother knew he would." Evelyn touched the dried petals gently, like she knew we'd find each other, need these pieces of her love. The letter itself was thick with plans for their visit east, his father's formal tone warming with each paragraph. There would be time enough to bridge old wounds, to blend past and present into something new. For now, it was enough that the door stood open, like that first night Lucas had trusted a stranger with his solitude. Their garden had expanded beyond its original boundaries, much like their love. The careful rows they'd first planted had grown into abundance, feeding not just them but neighbors in need. Even now, Widow Chen's youngest helped weekly with weeding, learning the patience of growing things in exchange for produce and stories. "Sometimes I dream about that first day," Evelyn said, watching a meadowlark splash in the bird bath Lucas had carved last winter. Stepping off that stagecoach, thinking everything was ruined when really everything was just beginning. Lucas's hand covered hers, his calluses familiar as heartbeat against her skin. "When did you know that ruin had become foundation?" she considered, remembering all the small moments that had built their love. "Maybe that first blizzard, when you were too stubborn to come in from the barn, or when you carved me that spoon with roses on the handle. Or," she smiled, leaning into his strength, "maybe I'm still discovering it. Every day we choose each other." Around them, their land bloomed with spring's rebirth. The pastures where Wade's men had once threatened now held grazing cattle, their brands marking them as part of the community trust Elizabeth Blackwood had helped establish. The fence posts that had been cut in warning now stood straight and true, weathered but unbroken. Lucas pulled her to her feet, brushing dirt from her skirts with careful hands. From the house came the smell of baking bread she'd finally mastered. That art, though they still laughed about her early attempts. Their life together was like that, she thought. Practice and patience, failure and triumph, each day adding another layer to their shared story. "Look," he said softly, pointing to where wild roses had seeded themselves among their careful plantings. "Some beauty can't be planned. It just grows where it's meant to. Like love," she thought, like their marriage, sprouted from necessity but blooming into something wild and true and freely chosen. The pressed roses from Richmond lay in her palm, a bridge between what was and what would be. Soon they would journey east, sharing their Montana-grown love with his father's house. But their roots were here, in this soil they'd defended together, in this home they'd built from hope and hardship. "Shall we plant something new?" Lucas asked, offering her a handful of seeds he'd been saving. Columbine and larkspur, hardy beauty meant to thrive in Montana's fierce seasons. Evelyn looked at their home, their garden, their love grown strong enough to weather any storm. At the chairs on the porch where they read together in the evening, at the kitchen window where his carved spoons caught sunlight, at all the small daily miracles they'd crafted from necessity and choice. "Yes," she said, taking the seeds and his heart together. "Let's see what blooms." Around them, spring wind carried the scent of wild roses and morning glories, of fresh-turned earth and endless possibility. Their love, like their garden, had grown beyond its careful planning into something both wild and true, a reminder that sometimes the strongest roots grow from broken ground and the sweetest blooms spring from love's patient tending.